But that brings us to this story, ladies and gentlemen. This, I just buckle up for this one. Buckle the fuck up for this one, okay? Because this is remarkable. This is remarkable to me. I just, we continuously use the words incompetent and fucking deranged and corrupt and moronic and stupid to describe Donald Trump, his regime, everybody that surrounds him. But it's rare that we actually get an example this blatant to show us just how stupid, ignorant, and naive they are, but just how smart and brilliant they think they are. So this is a story that I saw here, and this was talked about a little bit, but I believe now they've done more kind of digging and confirmation on just who this woman was. So this is a post that says, yes, the Russian agent was the interpreter for Witkoff, talking about Steve Witkoff at his meeting in Moscow with Vladimir Putin. It says, a few months ago, I published a post saying that something felt off. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, didn't have his own translator with him and seemed to rely on an unknown interpreter provided to him in Russia, which is just asinine. Just the most ridiculous thing you could possibly think of, considering just how important it is when each word comes across, when each motion, when every move that you make, the body language, how you say it, how forcefully you say it, like all of these cues are picked up on by not only the individual leaders, but also their staff and teams as well. Right. So it is extremely important that you have an interpreter that you can trust that will accurately kind of relay what is being said in the way that it needs to be relayed to give you the most accurate depiction of the attitude, the rhetoric, and what is being said by the person that, being said in a language that you don't understand and comprehend, correct? Like that makes sense to everybody? Like that's not something that's far-fetched. Like, it's very important when you don't speak the language of somebody that the interpreter that you're getting the words from gives it to you exactly how it was said, word for word, so you don't make assumptions or make false, come to false conclusions based upon what the interpreter is relaying to you, right? So we're all on the same page as far as that's concerned. Makes sense for you to bring your own American interpreter that has, been had background checks, has been fucking fully vetted by the State Department and whatever other agencies need to vet these people, right? So just makes sense, right? Okay, so we go on. This is not what you do in high-level negotiations. You don't rely on somebody providing you the translator, as the translator is a, quote, mission-critical resource. Even the New York Post, allegedly Trump's favorite news outlet, featured my original post here. According to this person here, here's what really happened. Steve Witkoff did use a translator provided upon arrival, an individual who turned out to be a Russian spy. A strategic and significant mistake to make going into such negotiations, either incompetence or completely trusting the other party, not good in any way. And there's a short video here that I'd like to watch, if I may, kind of giving us the rundown and a little bit more information on who this Russian spy was and how absolutely fucking ludicrous it was for them not to A, know who this woman was already, but B, be prepared with their own interpreter, or C, accept an interpreter from fucking Russia, in Russia. Like, it's just may not sound crazy to a lot of people that don't kind of not know the ins and outs, but, may not be privy to how important these kind of situations are, right? And how important it is that you get this information relayed properly back to the critical people. So let's dive into this one. Please hit that like button, share this stream out so we can show everybody just how stupid and dangerous this administration is. Because when people hear that Steve Witkoff in a meeting with Vladimir Putin in Moscow used a Russian fucking spy as his interpreter, I think it might invoke some sort of, I don't know, like, okay, these people are absolutely incompetent, dangerous, and should not be in power whatsoever. So check this out. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Can you believe that the American government used a Russian asset, a Russian agent, as an interpreter for a high-stakes negotiation about ending the Ukraine war? It sounds crazy, but it happened. At the end of April, Steve Witkoff traveled to Moscow to meet with Putin for the fourth time this year. Now, he chose to go alone. He entered the room at the Kremlin where Putin...
Right off the bat, how will you walk? Like, are you that overconfident? Do you have that much confidence? Or are you that worried about anybody else hearing what is going to be said in this meeting? Like, I can't think of many reasons why, Steve Witkoff such a high-ranking member of this fucking corrupt administration would waltz into this meeting with Vladimir Putin, an ex-KGB, somebody that has been around world leaders and knows how to manipulate people far smarter, far more accomplished, and far more competent than Steve Witkoff. And he waltzes into this meeting by himself? Like, what do we... Rappers go around and fucking Hollywood stars go around with entourages, right? Not to mention the Russian dignitaries, pick a country and see how their fucking government travels. And I guarantee they're not sending too many people into meetings by themselves. I hope I can impress upon you just how crazy that is, right? But it gets crazier. It gets crazier.
And two of his advisors were present. And there was only one other person sitting on the other side of the table. It was a woman. Witkoff turned to her, pointed at her, and said, "Interpreter?"
Witkoff! So right off the bat, nobody says anything to him as far, taking this video's word for it, and from what I've seen of this meeting, nobody said anything to him about this being his interpreter, right? He goes to sit down, and to the Russian spy, Steve Witkoff says, "Interpreter?" And she's probably like, "Oh, yeah, yep, that's me. Yeah, I'll interpret the shit out of this one. Yeah. Listen, fucking nuts."
She said, "Mm-hmm."
Yeah, I'll play it again.
There was alone. He entered the room at the Kremlin where Putin and two of his advisors were present. And there was only one other person sitting on the other side of the table. It was a woman. Witkoff turned to her, pointed at her, and said, "Interpreter?" She said, "Mm-hmm."
Yep, she was like, "I sure the fuck am. Can't wait to try to translate." Like, it's unbelievable. So she could be giving him, false statements. She could be spitting out shit that he would have absolutely no idea that she was lying straight to his face. Not only that, but for Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, to not know and recognize this woman, to not have the intelligence to know that, okay, these are some people that you want to be looking out for. We have seen her in photos with Putin. We have seen her as Lavrov's interpreter. We have seen her at jobs at the UN, which are jobs typically associated with Russian spies, right? Not typically associated with people that are interpreters, right? So to know her background, and it's crazy to me that they are not more aware of their surroundings in these situations.
He followed with a question from the embassy.
From the embassy. Okay.
Now,
he's asking her, interpreter from the embassy, and all she's got to do is say, yep, twice. And he's like, all right, I got my interpreter.
Stop here for a second. The only thing that makes sense here is that he probably thought this was a woman sent by the American embassy as an interpreter. There's one problem with that. The woman that he assumed was his interpreter is not just a Russian government interpreter. We can see her next to important Russian figures such as Lavrov. Medvedev,
so here she is interpreting for Lavrov.
Putin
Dmitry Medvedev.
Himself.
Vladimir Putin himself.
Different years.
All in photos, all in videos. So wouldn't be very difficult for the CIA or the State Department to be like, okay, hey, these are some people you want to look out for. These are the people that, you may be introduced to as, good people, but you want to make sure that you don't, divulge any information or say anything secretive around these people, right? Or give it's like geopolitics. It is how to go into a Kremlin meeting, how to go into Moscow 101. Like, this is the fucking first shit that you should learn. How to handle yourself so you don't look like an asshole. How to handle yourself so Vladimir Putin doesn't, so you don't show weakness to Vladimir Putin or stupidity or incompetence that he can fucking pounce on, because he absolutely will.
She also served as Russia's representative and second secretary to the mission to NATO in Brussels.
Okay, so you hear that? He said second, but in the kind of asterisk, he put third. So she was the third secretary to Brussels for NATO from Russia, right? Which, again, listen to what he says here.
Also served as an advisor to the Russian delegation to the OPCW.
Advisor to the Russian delegation to the OPCW.
The Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in The Hague. Now, neither of these are pure interpreter jobs. They're much more compatible with being a Russian spy.
Okay, so don't you think that our State Department, our CIA, our fucking special envoy should be privy to this information? Should be like, okay, like, we have a long list of spies that are probably going to try to, interdict themselves into these negotiations and kind of, get an arm up on us or a leg up on us, so to speak. And you need to be ready for this, right? Fucking unreal.
Not surprisingly, we see her here.
Here's another photo, right? So it's not like somebody that's behind the scenes. There's no photos of her, right? Like it's not like you should be able to be. He should be waltzing there, and be like, okay, I recognize her from the briefings that I've received from the State Department. I recognize her from the photos, from the film that I've watched with Medvedev, with Lavrov, with Putin. Like to think that she's an American fucking interpreter from the U.S. Embassy. And she's actually a Russian spy with all this prominence who's been next to Putin, Medvedev, Lavrov, and Witkoff has no clue.
Right behind the head of Russia's spy agency, Naryshkin.
She's pictured behind the head of the Russian spy agency, this asshole Naryshkin. Like, nobody gets proximity to people like this in Russia if you don't have an important
the head of
position,
Russia's
right?
spy agency, Naryshkin. Now, Yulia, that's her real name, interpreted for Witkoff over the course of that meeting. The problem with that is this was not just dinner chit-chat. This was a serious negotiation where the stake was the lives of hundreds and maybe millions of people. An interpreter can influence the negotiation. I worked as an interpreter. I know that every word that you say, the way you say it, the sentiment, and the way you look even at the client can convey a message. Now,
that's what I tried to say, right? That's even in the meeting with Putin and Trump in Alaska. The meeting with Zelensky and Trump at the White. Like, there are definitely little cues that were picked up on and are picked up on at every single one of these meetings, not only by the media, not only by us, the fucking commentators, but by the dignitaries themselves, by the envoys themselves, by the delegations themselves, that lead them to, either draw conclusions or go home and draw up other plans based on what they saw or what they were able to get over on Witkoff. Like, now we know we can at least push this far. So, okay, we know he's a moron. We know we can get the upper hand on him. So let's keep him around so that we can, use him as a fucking useful idiot, just like we do Donald Trump. So you can see how the tactics of the Russians are like, okay, we're testing the waters. Let's see who's an idiot. Let's see who knows what, how to handle themselves, who's going to divulge information. And let's keep those morons around, right? Let's keep them around because they seem to be ones that we can fucking manipulate and we can mold however we want. I mean, this shit's crazy. This shit is crazy. A Russian spy was the interpreter for the fucking special envoy of the United States at a meeting in Moscow with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. Huh?
Having a spy for the other side serving as your interpreter is inherently dangerous. And the fact that you accept that signals to the other side that you're at the very least incompetent and at the very worst, a very easy target for deception. And this, unfortunately, happened at the end of April in Moscow. Now, as my friend and colleague from the Spiegel, Fidelis Schmidt, joked, if she really was from the American embassy, the Americans have assets all over the place.
You can almost see how closely Putin was watching that conversation, because at the same time, Steve Witkoff on the opposite side of the table is saying, are you the interpreter? Are you from the embassy? Watch how closely Putin is kind of paying attention to that conversation. Watch how he's kind of looking across the table as he's sitting down.
Schmidt joked, if she really was from the American embassy.
Right? So he's looking at her. First he opened up, he was looking at her. Now he's looking at Witkoff, looking back at her, looking back at Witkoff, looking back at her. Like, he was very enthralled in what was going on, and he looked pretty pleased at the way the conversation was going. Right? He was like, "Holy shit! Did he just ask my own Russian spy if she was the American interpreter from the fucking U.S. embassy? Like, this is great. These people are fucking stupid."
Americans have assets all over the place, and they're going places. Unfortunately, that was only a joke. She was an asset, but not an American one. Like and subscribe for more of these videos.
And then you can see her here. Let's see.
Have assets all over the place.
Right. So there's Medvedev, and there's her behind him. Right. So again, not somebody that is like behind the scenes, not somebody that hasn't had her fucking picture taken, not somebody that shouldn't be on the radar of the State Department. Again, the CIA, whoever is in charge of fucking, alerting our representatives, the people fucking speaking on behalf of our country, who's who and what dangers they should kind of stay away from. But I thought this was an amazing representation of the incompetency, of the ignorance, of the fucking overwhelming like feeling of like they're an alpha male, so they can do whatever they want and everything. Donald Trump's the best negotiator, so he must hire the best negotiators, and they don't need anybody to go over there with them. And that's what happens. They end up getting fed a Russian friggin' interpreter